I came across another one of Left Sphere's arguments.
I've seen comments on my videos criticizing capitalism which pretty much amount to the statement, "Learn economics." This is basically alluding to the argument that capitalism is good because of conclusions that come from economics. And it's good to mention that there are a ton of different ideas out there when it comes to how economies should work. So when people say, "learn economics," they really mean mainstream capitalist economics, or potentially right of mainstream capitalist economics.
Economic reality is something that you just cannot ignore. So let's get into this argument. First of all, these people are not saying learn capitalist economics. They're basically just saying to you to learn the fundamental basics of economics, and it just so happens to be that capitalism pertains to that, that people who support capitalism do understand the fundamental basics of economics. Well, the question of economics is down to our place on this earth, and it's about our place on this earth with scarce natural resources, as resources don't last forever. They're not infinite. Resources are finite. And so it's a question of how do we better improve the material standards of living whilst using the fewest resources as possible. After all, if resources were infinite, would we really require the need to economise? Because that's not reality, and reality is that resources are finite and that there isn't enough resources to go around everyone. Then yes, we do need to economise, and that is the purpose and the reason for why the study of economics exists. So it's all about finding the most efficient system possible that enables you to translate those scarce natural resources into commodities to provide for the market, whilst producing the minimalist amount of waste as possible. Now, this is why, when it comes to the study of economics, you have to understand the role of prices. It's the reason why nothing in the entire study of economics, not a single damn thing, is more important than the information of prices. And it just so happens to be that when it comes to people who support socialism, they don't understand these fundamental basic things. That's why they're telling you to learn economics. You clearly don't understand the role of prices. You don't understand the laws of supply and demand. You don't understand fundamental basic things of what determines the prices in the first place. For you who believes in this anarcho-socialism, and let's just go along with that argument for a second, you're still faced with the economic calculation problem, which again, you don't understand. Just like you don't understand the knowledge problem. Socialism defies the laws of economics. Socialism is something so far removed from human nature, but not just human nature, as I say, economics itself. You have economic reality, and that is something that socialism does not pertain to. When it comes to the laws of economics, you cannot ignore the laws of supply and demand. And this is something that you often find. In the attempt through socialism, they try to control prices like as if they've got levers to control prices, where they attempt to raise or lower prices above or below market value. Do you support a price system? Do you support a monetary based system? And if you support a monetary based system, do you support controlling the prices above or below market value? The other question that you would then have to ask is, if you do not support a monetary based system, you support a moneyless based system, how the hell are you to know the information of what to produce more of, how much to produce, where to allocate the scarce natural resources? The reason why I say that is because you have no way of knowing that information without the information of prices. The reason for why the market knows the information of what to produce more of, the reason why we know how much resources to use or what resources are required and where to allocate it. We know that information because of profits and losses. We know that information through price signals.
So with that in mind, how does capitalist economics work? Well, step one, Assume the division of society into those who own private property, which is the sort of property which creates social hierarchy, such as privately owned businesses, and those who don't own private property, who are forced to sell their time to those who do in order to simply get survival needs met, along with political infrastructure that's designed to enforce and maintain this system.
I've always found this argument very childish, and they say it's all down to force because if you don't work then you'll die of starvation. You see, if you didn't work for a living, you wouldn't really get anywhere in life. Nothing would ever be produced. In fact, you wouldn't even have the food on the tables. First and foremost, that argument's fallacious. It's fallacious because even today you're seeing small examples of what a free market would do, such as, for example, the food banks. The food banks are readily there, available through charitable means, where the less fortunate who may not be employed get free access to the food, etc. It's their choice whether they want to work for themselves or work for another company. It's one of these things. And even if it came down to a case where they couldn't afford, maybe they'll go and work for a company for a short period of time, get the money, and then start up their own private business at a later point. It doesn't matter. And even if you call that force, it's just, something, it really is infantile. At the end of the day, when these people go to work for these companies, they have to go through a job application form. They have to apply for the job. That's not slavery. I don't think you understand the definition of slavery. You want to force people into a collective group and take away their individual rights and individual liberty to owning their own private business. You want to do that through force. And that, for me, is not the meaning of liberty.
Step 2. Do a lot of math. And now we come to step 3. Make conclusions from said math. And guess what? Those conclusions end up staying within the capitalist framework.
Maybe you were learning about stuff through a university or something, through some university degree. I wouldn't even trust them as far as I could throw a stick with regards to economics. There was a guy, Guy Spear, who went through university. I think it wasn't Oxford. I can't remember what university it was, but he came out top of his class and he got a university degree. And what he discovered was all that useless jargon and all these sums in mathematics that you see within the university course, etc., etc. All of that was useless. It was useless. It didn't serve any purpose in the real world of economics, in the real world of business and exchange. It basically meant nothing. It was irrelevant. Capitalism's all about the free market, the freedom to do business, the freedom to exchange. The only thing I can think about mathematics, and it's not really as such to do with understanding the capitalist system, it's more down to accountancy. Economics, the entire subject, isn't down to finances, and capitalism is just merely the means. It's a system of how we go about in achieving efficiency within the economy through capitalism, in other words the freedom of individuals to pursue their own economic goals and paths, through individuals being able to freely do business, having their own private individual businesses and stuff like that. This is just merely a system of how we go around and achieving that efficiency and lifting the masses out of poverty.
Now, step 2 can be carried out with total precision, and mathematical models of the current economy can emerge from that process. But my issue is with step 1, where the inequalities of capitalism are taken as prerequisite. And this is a step that the people who say, learn economics, probably are not even noticing.
So we've been through this argument on wealth inequality. The original meaning of the word equality did not stand for what you're trying to make it out to be. You're trying to make equality out to be as if everybody finishes in the same position. That's not what equality originally stood for. To say that people should all finish in the same position is just unfair, because some people put in harder work than others, some people are better skilled than others. That's just how life goes. That's a bit like trying to force in a sport such as boxing, and then sit there and say that it's unfair that one boxer is far better than the other boxers and became the champion. Then what's the point in the sport then? It's irrelevant. The sport would become worthless if everybody was to be forced to be the same. Equality originally meant equal opportunity, and we saw throughout history, whether you talk about Hong Kong between 1961 to 1997, they closed the wealth gap, proven by the Gini coefficient. Sweden between 1870 to 1960 had high levels of equality, proven by the Gini coefficient. Now this was an economy no different to Hong Kong that had low tax rates, that had a limited small government, never had the big extensive welfare state, had extremely low levels of government regulation, a strong private banking system, sitting there with high levels of equality, pretty much contradicting your very statement of how capitalism creates this wealth inequality. And even when you look at these examples, you saw the rich getting richer and poor getting richer.
Let's have a system that gives a small ruling class most of the power. No model of math or whatever that comes from that is going to adequately address the systemic problems that this sort of oppressive hierarchical power structure inevitably creates.
This is just a flat out lie. It's a flat out lie, and it's one that's perpetuated so often to make people believe that that is what a free market system is. Throughout recorded history, free markets have prevented the monopolies from forming, prevented the cartels from forming, prevented the collusions from forming. That's not where cartels, monopolies and collusions formed. The collusions, the monopolies and cartels all formed as a result of government intervention in the economy. Now, whenever you look at the freedom of the marketplace, and we've had periods throughout history to see for ourselves, because nothing's ever black and white. There's never ever been anything black and white. And we know that throughout periods, even in the United States of America, there's been periods of government intervention. We can then measure the difference in success when periods were freer in the economy and compare that to periods where government had intervened. And you could look at an example such as comparing the free market when the market was free from government intervention with regards to the turnpike industry, and then compare that to government's intervention through internal improvements, and you can see the market performed far better. What you are basically trying to do is you're trying to claim that a capitalist system leads to this 1% elite where this 1% rule everything and everybody's just left without. That's just so opposite of the truth. I suppose you could even look at, for example, Standard Oil. Now, I'm not going to go into the full story of it because I've touched upon this before. Standard Oil was a company that was very dominant, that by 1879 gained 90% share of the market, and yet despite that, the competition forced them to continue on driving down his costs. Predatory pricing is predicated on the idea that a company would slightly lower their costs below the value of other competitors to wipe them out, and then afterwards, once they gain this monopoly, they would shaft the consumer by just driving up the cost freely as they wish. Well, that never happened. Even when they gained 90% share of the market in 1879, they were forced to continue on driving down their costs, which led to the benefit of the masses. He basically enriched the whole of society. I hardly call that greed, and I hardly call that for the 1% elite. That's something complete opposite of what you're basically saying, and that's why the average household income in Hong Kong is far richer today than what it was back in 1950.
Capitalist economics does not look at the economy through a lens that acknowledges the power structures built into the system, and thus capitalist economics produces models that take the current economic and political system as a given, and this also helps justify the system. Economists with some fancy math can come along and say, the best course of action is my specific tweak on the status quo. And whatever that slight change ends up being, whether it makes things a little bit better or a little bit worse, the status quo continues and is justified.
So-called economists that come along with all these mathematical equations and try to work out what prices are, etc., and they try to fix prices, they're not in favour of capitalism, okay? What, in fact, if anything, what capitalist economists tell you is, they tell you to leave the market be. They tell you to let the market be free and to determine prices through the laws of supply and demand. They don't tell you, we're going to bring someone in through all this mathematical equation and we're going to work out what the value is. That's not what a free market is. A free market means the consumer determines what the cost is.
I'm definitely supportive of the use of math and technology to figure out the best ways for an economy to run. But that has to be based on the fundamental understanding that the economy should work for society as a whole, not for a system of class rule.
And this is one of the biggest mistakes to make, is this deluded belief that you can make everyone rich and we can somehow 100% eradicate poverty and we'll somehow have this perfect system. Your argument is fallacious because there's never going to be ever such a thing as an economy without exploitation, without corruption, without rich and poor people. You're always going to have these things. It's about finding the best and most efficient system possible that enables us to lift the masses out of poverty. It doesn't say, lifting everyone. It doesn't say, catering for absolutely every single individual, which is impossible. It's impossible. What you believe in is something of unicorns and rainbows. You believe in something that just isn't based on economic reality. And the reason why it's not based on economic reality is because there's not enough resources to go around everyone. And that's the purpose of why the study of economics exists. You have to economise for the scarcity. Thomas Sowell touched upon this beautifully in one of his examples, where he gave an example of beachfront housing. And he basically said that, let's say you were sitting with a population, and I'll use my own example, let's say you were sitting with a population of Great Britain of 70 million people, and let's just say for argument's sake, all you had was one beachfront, and then let's say that there was a very high demand for beachfront housing. There's only so much beachfront housing you can build. You can't cater for 70 million people. Who then gets to determine who gets to live in those beachfront housing, since there's a shortage? And there lies the problem. If you don't lie in the face of a price system that determines price for who gets to live in them, who's going to determine who gets to live in them then? Because it comes down to favouritism, and that's your problem with socialism. You don't seem to understand that there are shortage problems. And in the real world of economics, there are rich and poor people. That's always going to be the case, and there's always going to be people who, work harder than others. You seem to believe in this system of absolute pure perfection that just doesn't exist, and so you're basically complaining, and you're saying for people as a whole. But even that argument is fallacious, because there is no system proven in history that even comes close to rivaling capitalism for having lifted the masses out of poverty. There's no system. Socialism has never in its history led to masses being brought out of poverty. There's never been anywhere on planet Earth's history where socialism led the masses to, prosperity. Never. Not once. Nowhere. Not even in your Ukraine Free Territory, not even in the so-called, which wasn't even anarchist by the way, but anarchist Catalonia. Not anywhere. Nowhere have you ever seen socialism do so. What you have seen, however, a country like Cuba, for example, that was a very rich country before the 1950s, and along came Fidel Castro, and the rest is history. And most importantly, they couldn't even improve the technology of their cars, which is why they're still driving about in 1950s cars. That's essentially what your socialism does. It is regressive. So your argument against capitalism isn't rational.
The goal of economic production should be meeting people's needs, not creating profit for capitalists.
When you talk about a capitalist system, you're basically talking about a free market. And the only way a private business in a free market system is going to make a profit is by meeting the needs of their consumers. You're not going to make a profit otherwise. You don't have the subsidies, you don't have the income tax, you don't have any of that. So your only way to, make a profit as a business is by selling the goods that you produce. Even in today's system, businesses rely on providing a service to make a profit. They rely on their customers To say otherwise is just so far removed from economic reality, it's laughable. That's like saying, you know, Apple can get away with just producing whatever the hell it likes. It can just produce whatever product it likes and just throw it out there in the market and set the new iPhone 11 at something like £10,000 and people will just go out and buy it. That just isn't reality. There is a threshold to be met. The only reason why people are going out and buying those products at a certain price is because that's what they're willing to part their money with, and they do value the product. See, if businesses just went out there and produced whatever they liked and just put out whatever the hell they liked on the market, many of those businesses would fail, predicated on the fact that consumers are not robots. When they go into stores, they choose what they want to buy. They're not forced to buy products. People have, whether you like it or not, have benefited from it, and they continue to do so every single year, and these companies do so each year, and through competition it continues to improve the produce. You know, this nonsense is this idea again where you try to base it off, which isn't the real world, you try to base it off this fallacious idea that, you know, businesses just make profits, end of story, as if it cuts off there, as if it just cut off at the fact that the business just made a profit, end of story, that was it. You've basically cut off the fact that the consumer bought the product through choice. You also ignore the fact that the consumer continues to benefit from their produce. Now, that's an example. I benefit from, you know, that. I have benefited from that for many years, and that was all down to a private company, and that private company made a profit. Thank you for watching my video, and if you have any questions that you would like to ask me on anything you would like to comment in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, share the video, and of course, like I say, thank you for watching, and I shall talk to you later. Cheers.